So over the weekend, right, the weekend was primarily dominated by Wardley versus Hooney, and rightfully so. It was an interesting event. It was the one that was on people's lips for a couple of weeks, so it was primarily dominated by that, and as I said, rightfully so. But also on Saturday night there was Callum Simpson, and he fought for the European title. It was a good scrap actually. I went finally got a chance to catch up on that, and I watched the Mark Jeffries fight as well. So I got a chance to see, what was going on with Sky. And, it. I know with stadiums, it's not as straight. Well, I suppose it's probably similar with arenas, to be fair, because what do you think the O2 sits idle every weekend waiting on boxing? No, there's always something on, whether it be in the Indigo or the main O2, just about the same complex. There's always, dates and stuff like that. You have to, factor all that in. But at the end of the day, they ran a show parallel with a much bigger show like Queensbury were doing, and even with the Sky platform behind them, Oakwell, I think that's the name of the stadium, didn't look that busy, didn't look that packed, didn't look like it was completely empty or anything like that. But you think with Sky, with the backing that they have and the reach they have, it would have been a bit more. Where am I going with this? Well, I read an article recently on the Daily Mail, I believe it was. Actually, I only read it on my iPhone that I'm using to record. I've just been so lazy with charging some of my other devices that I'm kind of going off memory here. But for want of a better word, it was basically saying that Sky will not be renewing their deal with promoter Ben Shalom. And it was quite a lucrative deal, which is strange in of itself, because when Eddie Hearn first started with Sky, Sky were going through a phase when Eddie Hearn came in where boxing was being shown, but it was really, British boxing at the time was in a very bad place. It was in an awful place. Ricky Hatton, I think he had retired at that point. Well, he definitely had retired when Eddie Hearn came in, but he did have that one more fight in Manchester against the guy Paulie Malignaggi ended up stopping. I mean, there you go. Paulie Malignaggi stopped the guy, Vyacheslav something his name was. Can't remember his full name. I think he was Ukrainian, actually. I think anyway he was Ukrainian or thereabouts. But it was in a bad way. And Eddie Hearn came in. Sky were doing, at the time they were running shows with all different promoters, Frank Warren, Frank Maloney, etc., etc. Eddie Hearn came in, signed an exclusive deal, but he wasn't given a crazy budget straight off the bat. He was doing a lot of, prize fighter shows, which is what boxers started out with in general. They took the prize fighter concept and they called it, I think at the time it was called Ultimate Boxer with two X's. I remember they did one on BT Sport back in the day. I think Nick Webb won it, and amongst other ones. So that was what boxers started out with. But when they got the Sky deal, it was a big Sky deal. They were signing, people like, the Ben Whitakers of the world and people like that straight out of the amateurs. So it was very different, which is, again, strange for someone like a Ben Shalom, who was coming in with no proven track record whatsoever. It was extremely bizarre for them to do something like that. And it was obviously going to have growing pains at the start. We knew that. You're talking about a guy who's coming in and is trying to rival the big two, being Eddie and Frank. So you kind of said, okay, let's see what he can do and give him some time, give him some growing pains. And actually didn't start out too bad. Started out with some, miscellaneous shows. They weren't the worst. They weren't the best. They were what they were. And then we got obviously Brooke Khan. The undercard was nothing, but we wanted to see Brooke Khan. We got that. And throughout the course of 22, we saw some interesting shows. Some shows fell by the wayside. They were trying to do Hughie Fury versus Michael Hunter. They rescheduled that a few times, never happened. But you could see that they were setting up a good foundation, and then it just seemed to go to what. It just seemed to fall apart, and you started noticing big changes with Sky. Adam Smith, who is someone you just associate with Sky. I know obviously he had his health issues. You got to take that into consideration. Of course, we're not going to just pretend that like that didn't happen. But he goes away for a year, but then decides not to stay with Sky. And that was probably, Adam Smith, when he was at Sky, was not just a commentator. Okay, you have to remember that, right? He was not just the commentator. He was head of boxing. So essentially, Adam Smith had a lot of sway, and he could, someone like a Ben Shalom who was not as experienced, having someone like Adam Smith, his knowledge of the game, never mind commentating, put that aside, his just knowledge of what to do, that was missing. And you've seen it when Adam Smith was gone. You really seen it when he was on his sabbatical. You really seen it, and then he leaves and it stays much of the same. So the Boxer Sky journey has not been good. It's not been a complete success. It's not been a complete failure either. It has to be said. There have been some good shows. There have been some very, very good shows, but for the most part, it's not really been good. And the Sky brand itself, I think it's losing the appeal it once had. I I I don't want to necessarily put 100% of the blame on this deal not working out at Ben Shalom, and there's certainly a lot of good to come from Ben Shalom as well, which I'll talk about now in a sec. But I think the Sky model, what Sky is now, is not what it was even 6-7 years ago. I think now we have, well, I think YouTube is a big help. There's a lot of help there. You've got platforms like The Zone, Channel 5, who's terrestrial TV. And I think the way Sky have been going over the last couple of years, I think it's left a lot of bad taste in people's mouths. And for me, certainly, I haven't paid for Sky in 4 years. I just can't. Sky Sport, it's not worth my money at all. So I watch football and darts by other means. Sometimes if I'm in the UK, I just go to, a sports bar or something like that, if it's a quiet Saturday or something like that. But you get what I mean. That's the way kind of Sky have gone. And even with all the marketing they have, and all the promotion, etc., look at last week's show. I mean, that will tell you everything you need to know. So Ben Shalom, although he's leaving Sky, which some people really do want to be, like that was Joshua Boatsi's whole thing. He wanted to not fight on The Zone because he thought it wasn't big enough. He wanted to go to Sky. Well, good luck with that. I mean, how'd that work out for you? You spent more time on The Zone than you did anything else. Jesus, the hell. I think with Ben Shalom, he may actually be getting booted off and potentially sinking ship with Sky Sports. From the article, it seems as though Sky will only stick around for maybe the big shows. HBO, when they left boxing, they talked about doing something like that. It never happened. But Sky do show the occasional Riyadh show because there's obviously no pay-per-views, stars of their own that they have. So they show the odd Riyadh show. They may very well, they probably won't show Dubois versus Usyk. I would say they probably won't. And I know that, or at least I've heard that, The Zone do want to have the rights, not just worldwide, but in the UK. I mean, if it's a The Zone show with The Zone fighters, with two The Zone promoters, why the hell are Sky getting in the action? And I completely agree. I concur with that. And that's the best way to launch the app and get more people aware of it. I get that, 110%. So with Ben Shalom, I think that the time now is actually pretty good. He's talked about having deals with other networks. You would imagine TNT would be one of them. But saying that, I've heard the TNT are quite content to not go back into boxing. So therefore, it leaves you to think that Ben Shalom could be joining an ever-growing list of promoters who have now gone onto The Zone. If you look at some of the smaller promoters, and smaller with a view of getting bigger, Izzy As If is a prime example. He's doing great shows with GBM. He's there. You've got Frank Warren, you've got Eddie Hearn, you've got Oscar De La Hoya. So, and there's a couple of other smaller being a promoter there. I mean, there's a couple of Irish shows that go on The Zone. They pick up boxers from other territories. There's a lot that goes on The Zone in terms of boxing. Some people wouldn't even, you think you go on, you're like, oh, I didn't know they were showing fights tonight or something like that. It does happen. It definitely does happen. So there's a lot of good going on over there. And I think that having the monopoly of the 3-4, let's say 4, Izzy As If is a big promoter as far as I'm concerned. Let's say having the 4 main UK promoters all on the one platform, all on the one network. I mean, that's a power play if I ever saw one. And I think that's likely where Shalom's future is going to lie, because at the end of the day, when you look at it like this, when Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren are based on The Zone, I know they have done, crossover fights and stuff like that in the past, but when they're all on The Zone and they're all, their stock is running high, it makes the most sense. We just had over the weekend a Matchroom versus Queensbury show. There's only one fight, but nevertheless, it still happened. We're not seeing any boxer fighters go over there. I think that that's what they need to do, and I think that's what Ben Shalom will end up doing, most likely. I think that in many ways, I actually thought at one stage Shalom was a shoe-in to get re-signed by Sky until The Zone got Frank Warren, and then it kind of seemed to me like, the writing is on the wall for Ben Shalom to go over to The Zone as well, because I don't think TNT have boxing in their future, and I think Sky Sports are just kind of whittling down. I mean, like, they are, it seems to me, as I said, with Sky Sports, it could be a sinking ship, that it's only really Premier League football and darts that they want to stay into, because darts, when it was, their contract ran out this year with Sky, the PDCs, and they bid insane amounts. I mean, the darts world champion this year, well, actually it's 2026 dart. They normally do it New Year's Day or just after New Year's Day in 2026 to do the final. The winner at that tournament is going to get £1,000,000, which is unheard of for a darts player. I mean, it was unheard of when they were getting 500 grand for winning the world championship, much less £1,000,000. So it shows what and where Sky's priority is with regards sports. They want to be showing the darts, they want to be showing F1, they want to be showing football. Boxing and other sports like that are kind of seen as whereas the zone just wanted to be the Netflix of sports. That's what they want it to be, and I think that this is the great way of doing it. You get the boxing all into one place. It is literally going to be the UK's place for boxing, the zone. I can imagine, if in fact he does sign with them, which again I have no insider knowledge on that one, but it just seems the most likely out of the options that I'm sure Ben Shalom has. So those are my thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Ben Shalom, where does he go? Has his time at Sky been a success? It hasn't been a complete failure, no, it certainly hasn't. I think that we gave him time at the start. It didn't really progress. And I think as well as that, Sky's flame in general, the flame of Sky in general, it's not burning as bright these days. And I, for one, I'm not complaining over that, to be honest with you. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe as always if you haven't already. And until next time, peace.